You got involved in the business community in Westport.
I did.
Well, you were part of the business community.
I was part of it, and I felt what you got, you to give back. And I tried to give it back on a voluntary basis. I also saw that the more successful the town, the more successful our business would be. I took the broader view, and that was always the view of the business people in Westport for generations. And they going back to the 30s, founded the factories in Westport and gave huge employment when there was no employment in this country.
What factories were they?
Well, you had the Irish Sewing Trade Company, which is founded by Charles Hughes and old John J. O'Malley. Then you would have had numerous other smaller factories, like you had the Reliable Shoe Company, and then you would have had the old Cosyware Foundations, which was started up by the Gallaghers and the Gallagher family and the Reeses. And then you would have had the cap factory, which was started up by Stephen and Liam Walsh's father, and mother and father, and you would have had
brush factory.
The brush factory, which was later, but you had a whole plethora, probably about between 10 and 12 small industries in Westport, employing, I'm sure, probably up to 800 people, directly and indirectly in Westport, which was absolutely staggering in the country. When one must consider that there was no industry in Galway up to 1966-67. I mean, there was no industry at all. And Galway was a big town of 20,000 people. And Westport had more factories and more industrial employment than a city like Galway, or indeed Sligo, or anywhere else outside Dublin. And so it was an extraordinary venture. And all the businessmen, the old merchant princes of the town, the Gibbonses, and I have to say there was old Bertie Staunton, that was Miles's father, and then there was old John Gibbons, Michael Joe's father. There was Charles Hughes, and then you had John J. O'Malley, Jeff's father, and there was my grandfather. And these men, and Stephen Walsh and his father and his family, they all got together. They decided, look, we have no employment in the town. The town depends entirely on the agricultural community, which they very much appreciated, but they didn't have the spending power, and they only had seasonal spending power. And they decided that it would be far better if they could have people employed in the town who would have a weekly wage. So they took it on themselves to look into the possibility of founding small factories in Westport which would give people employment locally, and also provide a way of giving people spending power within the town, which would in turn come back to their businesses in an direct way. So they took a very broad view on it, and it was incredibly successful and was the envy of every town in Ireland. Coupled with that, you had a certain amount of tourism, and of course alongside that you had a very pretty prosperous harbour, which people forget today, and you'd have had quite a few people, quite a number of men employed working on the ships and the boats at the Westport Harbour. And in those days the stevedores and the men working on the boats at the harbour were very well paid, and they were paid national wage rates. And Mr. Malloy told me, when he was a young man working in our shop, he told me that all the men working at Westport Harbour, because in those days the harbour and the village at Boffin Street, all out along there, was a separate village from the town. It hadn't connected up with the housing as you see today along by the Westport House wall up the Quay Hill. And it was a separate industrial village, and all employed below at the harbour. And Mr. Malloy said that the men employed at the harbour were known as the Quay bank clerks, and they would come into Westport every Saturday night dressed in their best Sunday suits before they would go to confessions and then go in the town and have a few pints. But he said they were well paid and they were prosperous.
So you got involved in the Chamber of Commerce then?
I got involved in the Chamber of Commerce, and
you were chairman? President?
I was president, and before me Gar Golden and Liam Walsh, Stephen and Paddy Joe Kelly, and a couple more of us decided to revitalise the Chamber. It was defunct back about 1975 5 or 6.
Do you know when it was founded?
It was founded back about approximately, I think it was 1932, 33, by a man called Adrian de Fleury. He worked at the mills, which I forgot to mention. There was another major employer at the Westport Harbour, owned by Pollexfans, who were the ancestors of W.B. Yeats. And they ran a very successful mills at Westport Harbour. And he founded Westport Chamber of Commerce. And all the business people were involved in it at the time. And it became defunct then after the war years, and we got together as a group. We decided we needed to revitalise the chamber, and we felt that we weren't getting the investment that other centres were getting which had got in the 60s and 70s. We saw what was happening in Galway, what was happening in Shannon. We saw what was happening in towns which had the political clout which we didn't at the time. And we felt we had to form a business lobby, A, to sell the town, and B, to try and attract more investment into the town. And as a result, we all became very involved in this, all the business people in Westport, and we got tremendous support.
When was that?
That was about 1975, 76, and I think Gara Golden was probably, and Paddy Joe Kerr were the first presidents at the time. Liam Welsh was very, very deeply involved. Stephen and Paddy Joe Kelly gave tremendous support as well from the PJ Kelly, the hardware and timber merchants. And from that it grew, and then we were able to finance a full-time office and have an officer in that office, a secretariat, and through various FOSS schemes and so on. And over the years I found that I'd earned my stripes to become a president, and I felt very honour bound to become president, and it was a very, very enjoyable time.
What year were you president?
It was in the 80s.
In the 80s.
Yeah.
You do more than 1 year?
I did 2 stints as president. I
Yeah.
went out after 2 years, and then I came back in laterally.
Sometimes it's hard to get out.
Well, I think that's the mistake people made. You should
Yeah.
just give it 2 years and get out. Keep it short and sweet.
And what were the issues around your time? The train was a big issue, was it?
Well, the issues at the time were trying to hold what we had. That is, keep the rail service alive into Westport from Dublin, the train service. And the issue was to try and keep the existing factories, where we're beginning to lose some employment in them. Textiles were beginning. I should have added that our factories were all textile based, and the country now was open to imports. And so the textile industry began to suffer, and we recognised that we needed investment in the town. And the first breakthrough we got in Westport was the establishment of Allergan Pharmaceuticals, which came here about 1970, 77, 78, was it 79?
79, is it?
Originally, I think the site was purchased by the IDA, and they came here in 79. And we recognised that we had to try and get inward investment into the town. And we saw what was happening in the other centres, went and looked at them and knew that we had to, if we didn't have a TD or a minister in the town, you had to get up and do it yourself. And Westport was always a town to get up and do it. And Westport has always done that, both in attracting industry, in tourism, and promoting the town centre. Has always been a get up and do it. We never relied on political support to do that. It helped, but we never depended on it.
And they were going to close down the railway line to Westport one time, were they? Was it
there was no policy statement made to close it, but we knew it was going to close because it was inevitable, due to the fact that there was no investment in the railway line itself. And the bridge over the Shannon was also in need of massive repair. And a report came out in the late 60s called the McKinsey Report, and it advocated closing all the railway lines in Ireland except the Dublin-Cork line. And because the railway was losing money, there was no investment put into the railway. And in the 80s, what happened was, because of lack of investment and maintenance, the trains became worn out, obsolete, and so the trains were coming in late in the evenings. They're leaving, arriving late, and the line itself, the actual tracks were becoming worn out. And so because of safety and because of obsolescence, the trains were running at about 25 to 30 miles an hour. That, coupled with the fact that the fares were ridiculously expensive, and as a result, a very enterprising number of people started up bus services to Dublin. And I remember in the 80s, you could buy a return fare to Dublin for a fiver on a bus, and you probably have to pay about 15 or 20 pounds to go by rail, not get there in time, come home late, be frozen, no proper service. And so there was a kind of an inevitability that the line was going to close. And we Westport Chamber of Commerce started a campaign to keep the line open, and it was incredibly successful. And I have no hesitation in saying that but for the Chamber of Commerce in Westport, that line would be closed today. We also played a major role in keeping Knock Airport open.
So you think the chamber is valuable to the town?
I think the Chamber of Commerce in any town is invaluable. I don't think any town can survive without a Chamber of Commerce or, if you like, a committee of businessmen who get together and try and promote their town, look after the interests of the business interests of the town, and try and keep the town centre alive. And without it, without people getting together as a group, they simply have no clout. No clout. They have no platform, and it's critically important that people be part of a Chamber of Commerce, because you have some say, your voice is heard as a group, but not as an individual.